the Grey Hat Beard podcast.
Hello and welcome to part 2 of show 38 of Grey Hat Beard, the modern workplace podcast where we talk about all things Microsoft 365. If you haven't listened to news where we talk about all sorts of things going on, including Be an Ally on there, talking about some nice things, a bit of music in Teams, Gary's going to start playing backing music to stuff, and find out what the amazing Infinidash is and how it can change your life, then do go back and listen to part 1. Because in part 2, well, funny enough, we're going to be looking back as well, because we thought it felt about time, and I hope it's not too premature, but we thought we'd do a retrospective of the global pandemic. And just don't worry, we're not going to talk about coronavirus and what the government's been doing or hasn't been doing. This is going to be a retrospective on the modern workplace in the pandemic. So we're going to do it in the way, certainly I've been doing retrospective for a while, of talking about what went well, what went badly, what should we do more of, and what should we do less of. And I think many people have sort of said it's thrown 5-10 years of change and digital engagement has happened in a year. So what should we take from that? I'm gonna be a little bit cruel and say, Al, what's gone well?
What's gone well? Work-life balance has gone well. I think a lot of people have recognised that, actually, because we don't have to travel, we could still survive without traveling. It's not the end of the world if we don't go into the office, which has actually, created quite a revolution in many different ways for a lot of people with regards to, how they handle time outside of work, which I think is going to be a long-lasting effect. I know there's many organisations who are having differing views as to whether to revert back, but I think as an individual, most people will be looking at things slightly differently and looking at this to say, actually, how can I actually make the most of these new ways of working that are now available and have been proven to work? So I think the work-life balance will be quite a significant long-term change.
And I think you hit another one there of these new ways of working have been proved to actually work. I think the vast majority of people have been able to shift, and I realise kind of more technical and industrial where you need to be there and physically do things. Obviously, you can't do that. But if we look at information workers, people are sat at a desk, and even my wife's a pharmacist, and doctors have been able to shift their ways of working online. We've not, I wouldn't say no disruption, but things have been able to carry on. They haven't stopped completely, and it's been really good.
Disruption was always going to occur with the speed that we did things, but actually, the speed was almost good in some respects because it meant a lot of organizations had to change and test things. And I think that's one of the opportunities that we still have, is to carry on evolving, carry on testing, changing the ways that we're working to adapt. Because I think hybrid is going to bring its own challenges, which actually we haven't necessarily been addressing because we've all been remote or all been in the office. So yeah. I think there are going to be changes and there are going to be opportunities, but I think that work-life balance has worked well for a lot of people. Don't get me wrong, there's a lot of people who have been, it's had an adverse effect on their mental health because they've been stuck at home. They haven't been able to get the interaction with people, the engagement in an office. And I think, certainly, I think you described us as 3 middle-aged white men before in the news last week. And, we're probably more prepared for working at home. We have, more structure, and, certainly having a family helps. But those early in career people who don't have that have maybe been stuck at home with nothing, no escape, no way to kind of engage.
Or with housemates they don't really know, or didn't really know that well, or unfortunately maybe do know a bit better and wish they didn't now. So it's been tricky that I've heard from others.
So I think there will always be beneficiaries, and certainly I think a lot of people. Certainly the housing market in the UK has sort of changed dramatically in terms of people moving out of cities to find, those the greener grass outside of the cities. But I think that will be a long-term change for a lot of people, and they will look at it as a criteria that that they use to actually make decisions about their jobs and their careers moving forward.
Gary, any other thoughts to add to that?
So to kind of a went well from a technology perspective, really, is the kind of, I think, the realization of the cloud kind of, we've talked about the benefits of the cloud, but now everyone realizing it, the scale and the resilience behind, moving services to the cloud, that, managed service approach, like what we've seen as well with, we keep talking about it, the numbers of active daily users on Teams just skyrocketed. Yet throughout the pandemic, there were slight tweaks made to the service, but it kept up, and it was a good service still, and it kept a lot of organizations running as well, and getting into this new way of working. And I think that's maybe understated a little bit. Maybe it's taken for granted now a bit more, that it is actually there. But that was one of the benefits of how we were trying to sell the cloud to organizations, and now I think it's not really, it's assumed. We've had some DNS issues along the way,
certificate issues
and certificate issues, but it's interesting to see again. It's the, with the uptake in usage, yes, that has more of an impact on the service. There's areas that then can be looked at to be like, okay, here are our weak points. We can now, look at those weak points, and we can start to put things in place that will allow things to carry on working. So where we've talked about it in the past, I think we had Christos on from Microsoft, who was saying about the whole identity piece, and DNS is such a key piece of the cloud, is that Microsoft acknowledge that, and they've been able to acknowledge that because they're running the service now. Whereas, before, when it was all being run by IT departments, Microsoft just didn't have that visibility. Now they do. They can actually put things in place. So I think that testing almost of the cloud throughout the pandemic has been a real plus. I think and this thing's the scale of the cloud, right? So everyone's going to benefit from these updates. It's not going to be cycles of years of updates to go through.
You're right, it has become something that people just assume is going to be working and is going to scale as it needs to. It's like magic. People don't really worry. You don't get the same questions. Oh, well, how do we make this bigger? How do we accommodate the people? Yeah, how do we accommodate the 30 gigs of files that we've got? We don't get those questions anymore. It's just assumed that the cloud is stable and underpins everything that we do technically.
I think the other thing I like about this might be going off topic, but the other thing I like about the cloud is you can put a specific financial cost savings about doing good code and doing things properly, because without duplicating all your files everywhere, you can halve the amount of storage and things like that. So there's that nice visibility, whereas before, to actually realize cost of improving your code was pretty hard. Now you can get very, very quick benefit from that as well. And I think that to me measures to one of the things I was going to talk about was the whole employee experience and statistics that have come out from Microsoft. We talked in part one, I mentioned Worklife, and all the things that come from there. But the ability of Viva Insights and Microsoft centrally to look at what everyone's doing, to get all those trigger points, because it is in the cloud, and yes, it's anonymous, it's all private, set with the right amount of privacy, but it gives indication of what people are doing, the amount of people that are working after hours, and I'll come back to that when we talk about what went badly. But it's given numbers behind that. To the kind of downside is that people haven't been able to get that feel for what's happening in the office. The upside is, in this new hybrid world, there are other ways that you can measure and get that, and those could have taken years and years to really get some adoption. I mean, workplace analytics has been bubbling under the surface for a while. Suddenly it's got that visibility and need, because people aren't in the office, they need that supporting evidence, and it's kind of thrust that into the limelight and improved. I think we've seen not only those new ways of working proving to work well, but being built on and enhanced, and new ideas like teams backgrounds and the together mode to bring togetherness. all this has jumped up in the same way the space race kind of pushed people's new ideas. I think this has as well, and brought things that people didn't necessarily realize they needed until they're all crammed doing Zoom quizzes day in, day out, and realizing what they wanted there. So I think the metrics and new functionality have been a really big improvement.
I think you're absolutely right. Workplace analytics have been around for quite a long time, but just without a clear use case. But the ability to take all of that information and actually say, we can use it, we can develop these insights, we can actually make it so that there is a tangible benefit on individuals, their mental health, is phenomenally important, and it has never been more important than it is now. And I think that's, it's great that the ideas were already there, but as you say, they've been accelerated. The implementation, the realization of the potential has been accelerated massively.
And I think that's the thing. It's that realization, that understanding is like, oh yeah, this really is helpful, has jumped on.
Yeah.
And I think slightly related to that is, and I love this one, is the choice it's given people with disabilities. That kind of daily grind to the office, the kind of challenges of working there for many people, by having these new ways of working with things like transcriptions in Teams to help people there, that have come about a large part because of this acceleration, but a really big byproduct has been the just supportability, and they can work at home where they can make themselves more comfortable. If they have mobility issues, it's a lot easier to do things there. It's not to say they can't go to the office, they can still travel there, but it's given that choice, and depending on your disability has put you in a place where you can do more. And I think it's absolutely fantastic. And I'm not going to say that many people with disabilities have really struggled and had issues, but it's helped the support from people with that and helped jump that along. And I can't remember who I was talking to, but someone said it made a massive difference. Someone who was blind, because suddenly they had their setup at home, which they kind of had at work, but if they were going to a meeting room, didn't have the same support, so it became a challenge. Suddenly being there at home, they had all their common tools that they could use as everyone else was, and it's really empowered them a lot more. I thought it was really, really nice side of things.
You can never go wrong if you design with accessibility in mind. But I think, the reduction on the need to travel really kicks in some of those scenarios where, that home working, yes, you've got 3 monitors and you've got a high quality music mic. See the news if you don't know why that's important. If you've got all of these things set up, then actually you can be much more productive than if you're in the office for, maybe you spent a couple of hours commuting there and back. You've only got your one laptop, maybe that low quality screen that's still plugging in with VGA. You just don't have the same kit, which actually reduces your productiveness.
Yeah, absolutely.
Yeah, I feel like it's the the saying of work's no longer the place where you go, it's what you do. And that's the change, isn't it? Because you don't actually go to work anymore.
Measure the outcomes, not the hours.
Yeah.
And I know we did talk with Paul Dredge about hybrid working, and it's going to be interesting to see how that shift of choice happens. And it's all great when everyone's doing the same thing. What happens when it's more mixed, but hopefully better.
Yeah, I think it's a lot of this has been forced. A lot of companies have been forced into the position as well. It'd be interesting to see what will happen when there is more of a choice of office and home as well.
Yeah, it will be interesting to see when that choice becomes stable enough that people make life decisions based on it as well.
Yeah, well, yeah, I think we're starting to see some already, but absolutely agree.
Yeah.
I know again talking about the Great Resignation in part 1. A number of people are saying, no, I'm not going to work for them if they make me go back to the office. I'm going to look for other ones. There are people I've seen on Twitter doing exactly that. But moving on, it's all very nice talking about the good stuff, but to say the pandemic was positive, I think would be a huge. I was going to get political there. Let's not do that. A huge understatement. So what went badly, Gary? Sorry, not Gary went badly. Gary, what do you think went badly?
The delivery of PowerPoint presentations. The next slide, please.
What do you mean? So for anyone listening who's not based in the UK, the daily updates from our lovely government and the chief scientist officer, apparently, despite having some of the best technology and also implementing, was it £15 million refits for their press room, still couldn't give people a clicker for the slides and had to say, next slide, please.
That's not limited just to public facing. That is just, there are so many things. Zoom is now a verb. Next slide, please, is just what you expect in every Teams meeting where you have more than one presenter.
Just quickly, has anyone thought that actually there is a bot there that is one of the highest bits of technology, and we've just assumed there's someone clicking? That could be our prejudice.
No. But there is all of that which you've said, but it was the kind of we talked about it in the show with Clarissa about storytelling as well, and it's the kind of delivery as well. So I think those things could have been done better. To share information, be a bit more engaging.
I know we've done the good, but I take the no. If we're talking about the UK government presentations and those and many of the official ones, I absolutely agree. The amazing ways that data was visualized, especially in the early days as the pandemic was spread and people trying to work out how to do numbers. Those outside the UK who could work out that you can get more than 1 million rows, don't use Excel, that sort of thing. But there were some incredible visualizations and some incredible ways of processing that data. I think that's been something that's gone well.
You're too positive, Kev. We're in the things that are not going.
Badly.
So I think communication is something that's gone badly. I think there's too many ways of communicating. We've got Zoom, we've got Teams, we've got WebEx, and that's just for meetings. Let alone actually have Teams just being the primary form of communication is great, but we've lost that individual kind of like, wait a second. We can just wander over and talk to each other. And I think communication, has suffered massively. And a lot of people, I think, struggle with keeping it reined in to a point where they can still be productive. But we've lost that most valuable of commodities, the accidental meeting that we discuss something and discover something serendipitous to what we're doing. And we come up with, right, that's the idea that we're going to do next. And I think that's been a real challenge, and I think it's it still is, and it will continue to be, because those creative encounters are vitally important for us as individuals, to learn things about people, but also for organizations. So I think that's been a massive challenge.
Bigger bubbles, not bigger bubbles, but it's made more bubbles happen that those people you've worked with have carried on. But kind of breaking the edges of that, which is where you see that innovation, those crossover. I always, my ex-girlfriend at university did biochemistry, and it's like biology, chemistry together. Wow. But it is that thing. You can imagine someone having that chat at university, someone there going, well, I'll be looking at how the muscles work, and someone looking at physics and going, this is how pumps work, and going, do you know, they're quite similar actually now you mention it. And that's how things are discovered.
Was it AT&T that had a research laboratory that just had one long corridor, so that to get anywhere people had to go down to one corridor, so that they wouldn't run into each other and they would meet each other and they would have to be courteous to each other and to create that.
Scientists don't talk.
Yeah. But you're perfectly right. That's how creative sparks start, right? So I think, it seems strange that in this time of using so much technology that we've probably become less creative, and I think that's probably true. I think I've definitely felt sometimes like that it's become a bit of a struggle, because you're not necessarily being able to just have that one-off chat with someone, and it's the, like we always say,
organised, and then it. Doesn't have
exactly. Book a meeting.
Can we have an innovation session, please?
Or just send a Teams message going, hello.
Yeah.
And then you send back.
I've just had a great
no,
idea.
Hello.
Yeah. I think, and related to that one, I think what went badly is it kind of picks up from what you were talking earlier about, Al, of middle class white men, more senior people, kind of being more content working from home. The younger generation and their ability to pick up things from the office and learn and be able to have a chat and sort of get that feel for how things run. I feel for them a lot. I've went through the graduate program. It's a large investment bank, and it's just sort of seeing how people work, seeing the way people behave, thinking I don't want to be a knob like that in certain cases, but getting that different ways is a lot harder to do over meetings. And I love maybe another good thing is people have turned on video and got used to that more, so you get that face-to-face interaction, but it's not the same, and lots of people don't do it. So that ability to learn from others and pick up things, I think is something that we will see lost over a few years. It will take a while for that to really kick in, the reality of that. And I think there's been ways to actively learn, but that passive learning has taken a big hit, which is sad.
Yeah, it's something to focus on overcoming, isn't it? But that's why do we go into the office? Well, we actually go into the office because we're mentoring somebody, or we need to support and train somebody. That's an excellent reason to actually be face to face.
Al, any more what went badly at all?
I think one of the things that has been bad is the ability to turn off. I think a lot more people are on because they have kit to be remote, and they haven't been able to escape from that kit that they've got, whether it's a phone, whether it's a laptop. And I know, we've had the privilege of working remotely in a hybrid way for many, many years in consultancies where we've been on client sites or we've been working at home. And I think a lot of us in that consultancy space have kind of grown accustomed to it. But I think a lot of people, they just end up not being able to switch off. I religiously change my clothes when I finish work because it's a mental trigger to actually turn off and to put the work persona away. But that's something that I think a lot of those sort of tips, tricks, a lot of people were slow to pick up on, and it kind of created a lot of stress for people not being able to turn off. And that commute that commute was so stressful because I used to have to drive or travel for an hour. Now I'm just spending it working because my commute is now one flight of stairs to get to the bed to kitchen table to work, and that's negative. That's a really bad thing, and it takes a lot of discipline to get those routines that allow you to properly turn off mentally to be able to actually relax for the evening.
I think it's interesting. I've been on holiday, read a book, of course. So I've just been reading Work-Life Balance, My Arse, by Debbie Ireland, who's actually a former SharePoint consultant. And it's a book that I've had for a while. I've just not read it, but it's this kind of going through all of funny enough, things get in the way, right? And it's all this change of yes, I can read that email later, or actually should I go for a walk during the day when I should be working? And it's like this whole change of thinking, well, no, you can actually benefit from going for that walk in the middle of the day, even if you feel like you've got too much work on or there's too much things to do. You're better off just getting out, decompressing, going back, and you'll find go a bit slower, you're actually more productive. And I think all those things, it's such a big change. And I certainly don't think my work balance has been up and down, definitely, with just wanting to do these things, have these splits in my day, but then feeling bad because I'm doing it. It's like, no, I should be working. And then you end up doing that extra work at the end of the day. But actually, it's all about, you need to take that time, because if you don't take that time, then you're actually going to be less productive.
So, quick question for you, Gary, because I think a lot of organizations have expressed their support for flexibility, but that feeling of, I feel guilty for actually taking a break. Has anybody called you out on it? Go, oh, no, you should take a break, or said, oh, no, you can't take a break?
No, because I think it's one of those things that it's like, it's me. It's almost like my mentality. Yeah. It's not that anyone's saying you're not allowed to go for that walk. It's actually, no, you feel bad for doing it, so you're stopping yourself from doing that. And I think that's
people often won't see it either. It's not easy to see unless you have workplace analytics, and there are some great consultants that can help you with that. But it's the the ability to see people not taking a break has just disappeared as well. If you're a manager and you see people at their desk eating a sandwich and carrying on going and staying there till 7 o'clock at night, then you can see that it's a lot harder when they're at home.
And it is a lot harder when it's coming from yourself and there's no external criticism or it's
your own worst enemy.
You are your own worst enemy at that point. Yeah,
maybe your other half, but but no, I think definitely during the day, definitely. And I think similar to that, sort of the back-to-back meetings. I know many people at large organisations had that anyway, but at least you had that 5 minutes almost rushing between rooms, which felt bad at the time, but now you don't even get that. And
so tip of the day, the 5 minutes to make the meeting shorter is great, but put it on the start of the meeting. So it starts at 5 past the hour. It works a treat. Although it's really, really hard to not start the meeting bang on the top of the hour because you're just so programmed for it. But I've been doing that for the last couple of weeks. It's been really hard to change to do that. And so many meetings.
With Outlook, is that a setting so you can make it at the beginning?
But so many people have started those meetings early at the top of the hour, and then I join and they go, "Oh, sorry, you thought it started." No. It's in at 5 past. Oh, I didn't notice that at all. So it's quite an interesting impact on people. But give it a go and see how your peers find it.
I say the only thing is you need everyone to do that, because otherwise you don't get that bit of the. Because at least if you finish 5 minutes early, then you've got there. But I agree. I don't think finishes, you have to do. Yeah,
nobody finishes 5 minutes early. They just carry on, don't they?
Yeah. But then if everyone else does that, then I do like the idea though.
Yeah.
Anyway, given that what's gone well and what's gone badly, what should we do more of? And I'll kick off with this one, because I think this is something that hasn't changed enough actually, and we haven't really covered particularly. But it's objective driven work rather than time driven. If when you're in the office, it's how long you're there. I don't think we've got good enough still with sort of saying, here's a criteria of what you need to do. When you've done that, you're done. It's easy. It's still a lot of meetings. We're still kind of doing our 9 till 5 mostly. We haven't changed that, and that's good because it's not longer hours, but it doesn't give that flexibility, and it almost means and I'm trying not to cover one which I think Gary may say, and I'll come back to in a minute, but it's giving that ability, that choice and control, and also means that you're not tied into having meetings, being caught in with just being calendar driven. You should be looking to get outcomes and objectives, not just being driven by what's happening when, have you done it by this deadline. It's what you're doing and picking up things from there. And I don't think much has really changed with that, sadly. It's one of the few things that hasn't really, it's probably a step too far for people, that people have sort of translated office working to home. But I think if you want that hybrid, that's where the separations and benefits will come.
I think that really depends on the role that you're doing as well. I think when you're working, so if you're working in an agile team, you kind of know what you're trying to achieve in a sprint. So you should already be in that space that you're describing. If you're working with customers or stakeholders, you're beholden to when they're working in terms of when meetings might take place. But I think you're absolutely right in terms of properly defining objectives. is something that I don't think any of us are that good at, and not good enough to communicate to all of the stakeholders who might actually be impacted by the changes that you might implement for yourself. To go, actually, I always remember I had a great developer. He was really, really good at what he did. The hours that he worked were erratic, to say the least. And so it wasn't that he didn't get things done.
Gary and I are going through several different people who that could be. So,
It wasn't that he didn't get things done. It was that he would get things done and he might stay up overnight doing it, and then he wouldn't be available first thing in the morning, and nobody knew that he wasn't going to be available. So it was a communication issue about when he was going to do things that was the biggest problem, not that he wasn't doing the work. And it grated, because a lot of people were like, well, I'm at work at 9 o'clock. Why isn't he at work at 9 o'clock? Well, the simple fact is he didn't need to be, because he'd already done all the work that he needed to do. He just wasn't there for that particular stand-up meeting every morning at 9 o'clock.
Would he not have ticked off the things he'd done that would be in something like DevOps, or was he not very good at that?
That's part of the objective setting, to have that transparency of work and activity, to know that things are done. And you need that to be a robust, trustworthy process for that flexibility to really work.
And I think there's all conversations we've had where that meeting should have been an email. In some reality, that meeting should have been a set of tasks, and we could have ticked off that things are done. And
that email should have been a Teams message.
Exactly. As long as he didn't just say hello. It's So I hope we see more of that, and I hope that's one thing that evolves. But I'm not too optimistic about it, if I'm honest. Al, anything? What should we do more of?
I think data. I think the workplace analytics has been really useful, that the visibility of that information. But when I look at what Microsoft have done with the Work Trend Index, that kind of information is invaluable. It is so. Microsoft are in a unique position with the volume of data that they've got. They're the only organization that has quite that much data of that sort, and there is so many rich seams of information and knowledge that we can extract from it, that it needs to be investigated and used more to actually determine good behaviors, bad behaviors, things that are actually going to help us. And I hope that continues to grow in terms of the scientific analysis of that data, not the commercial, we're going to sell it for X, Y, and Z, but the scientific analysis of it.
And sorry, the Work Trend Index, that's one of the ones they put on the Worklab site, so Microsoft.com/Worklab. So go and have a look at that. That is certainly in the part one show notes. So do go and have a look at that if you haven't seen it.
Yeah, but I think that information is so important for us now.
And I think there's two things I'd say there. It's that data and that kind of analysis that's available, and being data driven by it. So taking those insights from it and making them actionable, having things. And if you haven't seen Workplace Analytics, fantastic, because it not only highlights where things are bad, but then gives you recommendations on what you can do to improve on it. And I like that. It's that being driven by the science,
and it's
become a common phrase, but
it kind of ties into your objectives. If you can measure that objectives are being met, and these are the behaviors that are contributing to those objectives being met, and this team over here has the same objectives but they're not meeting them and they have different behaviors, that's where it really kicks in, to have that comparative analysis.
Definitely. Gary,
what can we keep doing more of? It's an interesting one.
Asynchronous communications.
Yeah, is that so obvious?
Wait. Did I hear something there?
Yeah, I mean, it's a different way of working, right? It's embracing a new way of working. I think certainly, I think some of us, we've already mentioned, been more attuned to the newer way of working because of how we've worked in the past, maybe more remotely, and we've put these practices in to work a bit more asynchronously. But I think now with everyone on Teams, you have that ability to do that you send a message to someone and it's okay not to expect an instant response. They will get back to you, and you're working towards that goal. And I think, Kev, your point kind of touched on this, is that it's difficult to really have that asynchronous communication if you're not all going in the same direction. You've not got that objective. And I think, there's a number of things that have to play out. I think beforehand to let asynchronous communication really take off within organizations, and some of that may be actually being realistic about deadlines, about when do we need this for? Is this absolutely vital? Does it have to be on a specific date? Or actually, is this more of like a roadmap item where it could come in the next few weeks? And if it comes in 2 weeks or 4 weeks, doesn't matter, because we're going to get the outcome that we want. And I think that potentially is another big change, because people like to put big dates on things, but everyone loves the big launch. Whereas
Windows 11.
As we found, it's not always the way to do things, and it can put pressures on different areas that are just not needed, and you rush things for no reason, just to hit an arbitrary date. In many cases. So I think having that objective changes, working in a different way of improving your communication as well. So in asynchronous communication, you've got to be clear about what you're trying to achieve and the discussion, what part you're adding to that discussion as well, so that if you're not verbally communicating with people, you're doing it through text. You need to be clear about what you're wanting to achieve, and even compromising with people as well over time. Exactly, you've got to have a compromise, right?
No, you don't.
Yeah, I was right. But it's just a different way of working. I think a lot of people have not been attuned to at the moment, but as we've seen, it does work in some areas. I work in open source. That is all asynchronous communication, working with 50, 60 contributors around the world in different time zones.
So I don't think this counters that, but I would add on top of what we should do more of is have a good natter as well, because I think that's something that got missed. So I think async comms and having that more formal way of working, absolutely, and build on top of that, time your meetings to have a chat and let people, especially where people are at home in a hybrid, have a chance to have a good natter as well, get things off their chest, because you don't get that with async. It's more thought of, it's more focused, and I absolutely think there should be more of that. It shouldn't all be driven by chatter, but make sure there is time for that chatter, because there's people who need that too.
But what you will find is you have more asynchronous communication, you will have more time for those elements.
Absolutely agree.
You're saving that time, because you're not just filling it with meetings that maybe don't have agendas and objectives with them.
Don't have what meetings without agenda? They don't exist. It's a myth. It's meetings with agendas. Yeah, they don't exist.
But I think that is, and I genuinely don't think those things are mutually exclusive. You can have those async comms and have more chat. And you're right, Gary. If things done properly, it enables that to happen more. I think that's an important thing. Talking of async comms, but talking of not being deadline driven, we're not very deadline driven on this show, but maybe we should start to move on to the last one. I've forgotten who we got to, so I'll open this up to whoever wants to go first. What should we do less of? Hello?
Less of? What, just saying hello? Yeah.
Yeah, just saying hello would be the starter.
That would,
less meetings, and less meetings without agendas, right?
Yeah. Yeah, less communications that aren't targeted and precise. When they're typed. I think all of the things that we've identified as being negative, let's do less of that. That would be the easiest way to sum it up. And I think, comms, we talked about comms, meetings that are back to back, just the volume of meetings. There's a lot of
to pick up on something a bit different. I'd say less of being in one place. I think the move towards the hybrids gives options and choice. I'd like to see more of that. So much as I love my little office here, the thought of occasionally going to the office, the main office would be good, occasionally visiting client sites. I want to see less of going back to doing that all the time, but also less of being just in one place. Would be nice.
Yeah, I think, you could, when you're looking at a distributed organization, less of I'm going to go just to this office and more of, well, we can go wherever we want. We're not tied, actually. We can go to the seaside and have our meeting by the sea for all of those who are by the beach, or those who want to make the journey. You can work in many different ways at many different locations, whether it's in a coffee shop, someone's house, shared offices. There's lots of different ways that we can work. So less being tied to what was before and more experimental going forward would be good.
And while it's definitely a buzzword and overused, I mean, we've even used it in the podcast as an episode, but hybrids, I think there is a reason, because it is that change that actually what we saw with the pandemic was a shift to remote working, and we had office working, and now it's trying to enable both of those to happen. And definitely feels like there's more work that needs to be done with that.
It's going to be it's potentially going to be a harder change than it was to get online. I think there's going to be many disagreements about what is best, because there is choice. There is choice for organizations and there is choice for individuals, and it's going to be the feet that are going to do the talking for probably several years to come before it kind of settles down into a balance that we all then acknowledge as being the new norm, as opposed to the new norm that's just gone.
And that balance is going to be so situational and down to teams as well, and the people that are actually working in organizations. I think that's going to be the hardest thing, is that there isn't one size fits all for this at all. Some teams will be probably maybe quite happy to spend 4 days in the office, all huddled around, working together, ideas flowing, whereas other people in different roles be quite happy to be 2 days, 3 days remote.
And there's going to be challenges when people want that flexibility, and the reality is you can't have that full flexibility. If something's happening in the office and everyone decides to flood in at the same time, it's not going to work. So I think
the other thing that will challenge that at the moment is that we have people who all have different situations, are in teams that used to be in one location, for example, and now they're going to have different outlooks on what's right for them. Whereas actually moving forward, when you hire somebody, you can then say, actually, this team is going to be 3 days a week in the office, or this team is 5 days in the office, and you can state that when you're hiring people to actually shape the working habits of that team. Whereas at the moment it's, well, actually we're at the beck and call of individuals and what they expect and what they want.
So I think it's time to wrap up. I'm going to throw one more what we should do less of, and it's a slightly controversial one, and that's change. I'm all for change and pushing things to happen. I think in reality people need to stop a little bit and start to get used to these new ways of working. I think it's been forced on people and things like that. So I'm going to put a controversial one and say, actually, we need to calm down a little bit and try and add some flex, build on what we've got here and build on that. So it's not going to stop completely, but throwing a massive change in.
I would adjust that and say less massive changes, smaller, more incremental changes. Let's focus on those, not the whole world is suddenly going to work online. Let's go for something smaller next time.
Smaller and incremental
changes, because that's how we evolve, how we work, and we improve things. And if we just go, we know that the big changes aren't great. We don't want that 3-year cycle for releases of our software. So we want smaller changes, like Windows 11. Every half year, every year.
maybe it's the thing. Maybe we're just going to get 12, 13 just following in rapid succession. Maybe that's what's going to happen. But no, I think to wrap up, I think we have had a lot of change. I know Gary's had a holiday. I think we could all do with a holiday and maybe just a bit of a break from it all. I think we all want it to be finished and stuff like that. So maybe certainly less big changes, and I think allowing people to settle in the new norm a little bit. So improvements to that, yes, but not trying to push too much to people change at the moment. Let's be nice to people for a bit. That went on longer and more than I thought. So thank you very much, both. It's always I love a retrospective. I think that what went well, what went badly, more of, less of is a really nice way of doing things. If anyone's interested, often now we then go away, pick up themes and think about some tasks. But I think we've probably gone over time enough to go through on that. So maybe one for a future show is what would we like to do to actually make those change happen.
How can we change the world?
Tonight. Yeah, exactly.
Yeah, that won't take long at all.
I'm not looking for New England, but I think we need that high fidelity microphone first before I can start singing that. Part one for anyone who doesn't know what I'm talking about there.
Oh dear.
Yeah. Exactly. Can you? What's worrying me is I'm the only one who's eaten out of the three of us, from what I can tell from the messages. So, and I'm the one sounding delirious, which is slightly worrying. But thank you very much, everyone who has stuck with us. We will be back next week. I was about to say, next week. I was going to say with a guest, but I think it will be the one after that. So we need to see if we can get someone lined up for that one. I know it's August and not so many people around, so we'll try and get something lined up for there. But otherwise, I've been Gray.
I've been Hat.
I've been Beard.
Thank you very much, all. Look back at yourselves and look after yourselves. Bye-bye.
Bye-bye.
Bye.
Thanks for listening to Grey Hat Beard Podcast. The song Drink Up My Mateys was brought to you by Black Bones under a non-commercial attribution license.